Okay, we got slides, so we'll look at this. This is something I do in every class I've ever taught, is I want people to think for themselves. And I'm going to share information with you, but it's not to influence you to agree with it. It's to put it out there for you to think about it and make up your own mind. My science teacher, Dr. Hugh Penturf, he didn't care if we gave the right answer. He didn't care about the right answer. He wanted to know how we got it. And he made us the first teacher that taught me to think for myself and how to think and how to come to my own conclusions in a good, credible way. And that's all I'm asking you to do. Think about it. Challenge it if you want. Don't believe it if you want. That's okay. It's good. I'm not wanting you to, I'm just wanting you to think about it and to make up your own mind. And if you'll notice, the other side of the argument of pro-marijuana doesn't have that same attitude. They just want you to buy in what they're telling you. And I don't. Don't buy into what I'm telling you. Look at it for yourself, go to credible resources, and see what you think. Think for yourself. So why am I the one sharing this with you? Because I was very naive. I had been a police officer for 8 years. I'd been a St. Louis City police officer, worked the inner city, walked the beat in the housing area. I was a military police officer. I was a state trooper working a high crime area in Jefferson County for 2 years before I went undercover. I had been in federal schools, state schools on drug abuse and that. And I went out and I walked up to a kid and said, "Hey, what's happening?" Because that was a buzzword of the day. "Hey, what's happening?" And I was blown away by the kids knowing so much more than I did. And so I decided that I was going to have to catch up to where they were, because they had wrong information. They knew more, but a lot of the information was wrong, and they believed it. And I had 5 years of firsthand seeing that I was working deep cover. In other words, I didn't go in and out for drug buys. I went to a community, and I might be there for 6 months or a year and a half before I made my cases and arrested people. So I was in deep cover, deep association, went to the parties, and got to say, well, when you do this drug, I see this happening. And then mirror that observation with advanced schools like DRE, a drug recognition expert. I'm not just an officer that's qualified to do that. I am qualified to teach it and manage the entire course manager. That's the highest level in DRE you can be, and it's because of the training in that. And what is a DRE? If we evaluate alcohol impairment, an officer is about 80, maybe a little better than 80% accurate on determining over or under legal intoxication, and that's pretty good. A DRE on 7 categories of drugs, we enjoy about a 92% accuracy rate. That's the science. So I'm putting observation on the street with brain science. I teach with a degreed psychologist, Dr. John Duncan, teaches med school about the brain, and he and I teach a 4-day course together. And that's why I've been up here for the last 16, 17 years teaching in South Dakota. I feel like it's my second home, and I like it here. And the other thing is that in doing drug enforcement, I got into drug prevention. And I got blessed with getting into a group called Drug Watch International. And on the board with me and personal friends is 3 drug czars to 3 presidents. Don't get smarter than that. One was Dr. Robert DuPont. He was the first NIDA director, National Institute of Drug Abuse. I can call him Bob. Isn't that cool? He's a great, intelligent guy, runs a treatment center, and I can send him an email and say, "Bob, someone asked me this question. What is it?" I've got Dr. Carlton Turner, who's a botanist. He was a director of the marijuana research farm in Oxford, Mississippi. He was Reagan's drug czar. And he tells me to call him CT. That's his nickname. So I can call CT and I say, "Hey, what about CBD? Can it kill anybody?" He said, "Yeah, it can. It does." Well, people are saying it can't, so they're wrong. These are the kind of people. So I'm not the expert. I know where they are. and they're generous with their time and information. So, and I'll give you the source. I don't hide them. And of course, my bride, 56 years, my best and main critiquer that keeps me on the straight and narrow. So, and we have 17 grandchildren, and that was my motivation, selfish. I was going to go into criminal investigation, and I changed my career into prevention and education because I wanted to protect kids. That was more important to me than what I thought my dream job was. But that's why you got me. And again, this is where we're going, and I've already told you that, so we'll save that time. And I'm going to give you simple principles that go across the board, and they're general, good, strong principles. And hopefully it'll simplify things and make it easier and quicker to understand. If you want to understand drug abuse and how it affects people, understand that drug abuse mimics injury and illness of the brain. How we got the DRE program is Los Angeles police officers would go in the emergency room and the doctor would be checking for brain injury or questioning on brain illness. And the officer would say, well, I've seen that on PCP. I've seen that on marijuana. I've seen that on meth. And that's how we got, with Johns Hopkins University, validated that DRE is recognized in court and meets the Fry test, which is common knowledge in the science community. And this is how we got it. Officers noticed injury and illness matched what the effects are on drug abuse. And if you want to understand drug abuse, understand mental illness. And this is why anytime we have a violent crime, the first question should be, what's the origin of the mental impairment? Is it injury? Is it illness or a substance? That's the main thing, not the vehicle or weapon and that's important. We got to be safe with them. I agree. But if we don't fix the brain, we're going to have a problem with anything. It's about the brain. And the brain should be, you see that over here where it's all smooth? Well, that's a balanced brain. Homeostasis is the term for that. It's a balance because the whole brain is firing balanced. And what injury, illness, and substance abuse is, what you think you see as holes aren't holes. What happens to the brain is a part of it gets overactive. Well, there's only so much fuel in the brain, so it robs Peter to pay Paul. It takes the energy away from another part of the brain, and when you do an energy scan, it looks like there's holes there. No, that's saying there's not much activity there. And that part of the brain isn't working well. And if we know what's in that part of the brain, we know what the problem is. That's how simple it is. And a very important thing to understand is even a fly has a brain. And some basic things a fly does, we do for survival, for eating, for anything else. So there's some basic in the old, what they call reptilian brain. But the human brain is the only one, us. Dolphins have a bigger brain, but they don't have the human development of the frontal lobe. That makes us human. And I say this without any detriment. This isn't a put down. But if you'll notice, drug abusers, as they get deeper and deeper into drugs, they make decisions more like an animal for survival than a human and a human community. You're killing the humanness of that front brain. And what's in there? Well, it's who we are. It's our values. It's our judgment. It's our problem solving. It's anxiety, which is very important. You know, people say, oh, anxiety means if a guy says, come on, let's get dancing. Oh, no, I can't dance until I've had 2 beers. Well, if you notice after 2 beers, the guy still can't dance. He's just not embarrassed about it. But I'm not talking about that kind of anxiety. If we went outside and it's slick, all of our anxiety would go up to be careful. Anxiety is being careful. It's also caring. And I'm going to show you a slide in a little bit. You see a mark there pointing to it, and the other slide. This is what is really, really, really important on marijuana. This is why you're seeing more suicides and more violence. And this is why. is because of this part of the brain being affected. And this is another way of showing you the difference between, and people say, well, I do drugs. What do you mean you do drugs? Well, I do medicine. No, not the same thing. Not the same thing. And medicine and drugs are chemicals, but the purpose is completely opposite. If you get sick, you get out of normality. That's your normal bubble, how we function. For me, it's allergies. And if I get sick enough on allergies, I'm going to do a substance, a chemical, and what that purpose is to bring me from abnormal to normal. That's what drugs do. You are abnormal, and we take a chemical to balance it, whether it's epilepsy or some other problem. We take drugs to balance the body back to normal. Well, if you're doing drugs, you are normal. And then you take the drug to leave normality, to get high. Well, when you do that, immediately the body compensates and tries to fix it to get it back to normal. And when the drug wears off, instead of going to normal, you basically go to the opposite side it was doing for you. That's brain abuse. Totally different. Don't ever confuse medicine with brain abuse. I don't like to call it drug abuse because you're not abusing the drug. The drug's abusing your brain. And this is, and when I go into especially an adolescent treatment center, and I'll ask the kids, I'll say, what are you getting out of your drug? What's good about it? And we'll put all kinds of things up on the board. Boils down to having fun, feel good, being with my friends, and escaping problems. And then you get a variation from there. But the sad thing is, what they're after is exactly what they lose. Because I put dashes on all that stuff they just put up there, and we start talking about their life and where they are and the consequences, and suddenly you can see the lights come on kids that are addicted in treatment. And they'll sit there and look at it. It's like saying, I'll give you $100 for coming here tonight. But what I didn't tell you got to give me $1,000 going out the door. The payback is always bigger than the reward. And if I do speed to get high, what do they say when you come off of it? Crash and burn. If I'm doing alcohol to be socially lubricated in the life of the party, if I'm hooked and I go to my in-laws to have fun, aren't I anxious, uptight, awkward, and out of place? If I do heroin and it feels great, what's withdrawal? Flu-like symptoms, intense. Doesn't matter the drug. The high is smaller than the payback, and it's just the opposite. So the very thing you seek is the very thing you lose. This one, and you got to do this with kids because they want to perceive what the risk is. So what I'm trying to show here is what is normal, and then what does when we add drugs do. And according to WHO, the World Health Organization, about, was that 15% are born with a mental or physical challenge because of our gene pool. And I'll ask, I don't do junior high very often, but sometimes I'm doing high school, and they'll ask me to also include the junior high, and so I do. And I'll ask even junior high kids, if I add tobacco or alcohol or marijuana or any other substance to that population, that's a world population or it's rapid city population or whatever community you want to define, if I add those substances, will that group stay the same, get smaller, or get bigger? And even grade school kids will tell you it's going to get bigger. And when it gets bigger, there's more people in the problem and less healthy people. That line moved. That's a no-brainer. So is it any surprise if we accept marijuana as a third social drug, suicides, homicides, car crashes, health, brain health is going to increase? Absolutely. Without question. Without question. And understand that drugs change who we are. Your values change, your personality change. I heard one little girl, she was a high school girl, sophomore age, and she took a joint at a party and told her friend next to her, boy, I hope mom and dad don't find out this would kill them. And 6 months later, it was words I'm not going to repeat anywhere, especially at church, and it was derogatory towards the parents, saying they don't understand me. Well, no, they don't understand brain impairment. And that's what she's suffering. She doesn't know it. Parents can't figure it out. Made a conflict. But her attitude in 6 months changed from very positive to very negative to her parents. And a good example of that is Phineas Gage. If you take a psychology course, you'd study Phineas. He was a good man, married man, young man, and a competent people skill person because he managed the crew blasting to the mountains to lay the railroad beds out west. And a rod went off prematurely and went through his skull, through his frontal lobe, and he lived. And they studied him on brain injury. That's how we did brain studies then. If you got hurt, what didn't work, and then we studied what part of the brain that happened to. And he became a jerk, a womanizer, alcoholic, vulgar, rude, crude, antisocial. The point here is Phineas didn't decide to do that. The injury did. When I worked undercover and saw kids using 1 to 3% marijuana, I saw them change to jerks like the little girl that marijuana did. It wasn't a decision, it was an injury from the substance. And I want to point out that the same people, they have everything going they can. Let's use harsh punishment. Let's use hemp. Let's use medicine. They use religion, everything they can think of to get their drug across the finish line. Well, one of the first ones was hemp. And I brought in experts, world experts, to Jefferson City, Missouri, when Missouri wanted to consider it in the 90s. And I brought in the world, and I asked the legislators to come and the people to come, big crowd, and people high in intelligence and fiber and marketing simply shut it down, and it did not go anywhere because they heard the truth. Then they waited about 10 years and came back without letting anyone know what they were going to do and got it passed. That's what they did. And guess what? Look at the numbers here. Only 4% of the crop in Kentucky, which is a legal statewide operation. Anyone in the world can buy legal hemp. They can do anything in the world they want with legal hemp. There's no market for it, just like the experts said there wasn't. Where's it all going? The CBD market. They lied to us. Do you think they're going to be honest about medical marijuana? Same people. And people get confused about marijuana, and this is an extremely important point. Most people know that there's cannabis sativa and indica. That's the two main variants or species of marijuana. But actually with hybrids now, we're somewhere over 1,000 variants of the marijuana plant. Now let me show you how complex that is. If I have a cannabis sativa plant, and I pick a bag of marijuana on this side and a bag on this side, they're not the same compounds. A few hours later, they're not the same compounds at the time of harvest. You will never get two identical doses out of raw, artisanal, organic marijuana. Now think about this. If you go to the doctor and he said, I'm going to give you a depressant for this ailment. Well, doc, there's a few hundred different depressants. Which one are you going to give me? Oh, I don't care, just one of them. I've asked doctors on this on debates. Doctor, what ailment off of what plant at what time after harvest is what they call a therapeutic index, and I'll talk about that later, or what we would call optimum dose that does the most good with the least side effects, because every drug, without exception, has side effects. There is no such thing as a chemical without side effects. So what They can't answer it. No one in the world can answer it, and no one in the world will ever be able to answer that question. Do you see the complexity here? It's nonsense to say medical marijuana medicine. Well, which one of, and some claim there's over 5,000 variants of hybrid plants. But we can safely say over 1,000. Which one? At which time past harvest? And here's what's changed in the marijuana world. When I worked undercover and I saw the problem of 1 to 3% in the 5 years I worked undercover, I want you to think about this. I dedicated my life to get in a position to be a criminal homicide investigator for the Highway Patrol. I put a lot of effort and energy in doing that. I went in undercover because I was kind of guaranteed a good criminal job, and I was offered to be the lead supervisor of the largest, most active troop out of our 9 troops in the state of Missouri, to be the criminal supervisor for that whole troop. I chose prevention because of what I saw in 1 to 3% marijuana. The national average is 15%. And science has very little information on what over that amount's going to do to people. Now, this is your new marijuana, not the leaf stuff. Someplace they don't even see leaf anymore. Oils, wax, extract. This runs from 20 to 99% pure THC. Here is marijuana in chemically. If we talk about chemical compounds, this is going to help you understand it a little better. Drugs mimic what they call neurotransmitters, brain chemicals that talk to receptors. Meth and amphetamine talk to brain receptors that read dopamine. Ecstasy talk to receptors that serotonin. Well, THC talks to anandamide receptors. And they didn't know all this till early 92. So the real good science on marijuana and brain started in 1992. That's not very long on in-depth research. If you'll see the chemical structure of anandamide, the brain chemical, it is different than THC. Different means the receptor is going to adapt, neuroadaptation. Big word for brain change. Nice word for brain damage. You change your brain, you've damaged it. And that's what it does. Just because it's different. And Dr. Bertha Madras, who's a researcher for Harvard University, said there's 3 big reasons why marijuana is not good for the brain. One, it's on the brain receptor for a prolonged time. If I use anandamide in the system, and you can see the systems that CB1, the receptors work with, I use it momentarily and it's gone. If it sit on my receptor for 6 to 8 weeks, like a joint of marijuana would, it would change my brain profoundly. And anandamide is not very powerful. THC is multiple thousands of times stronger than anandamide. So longer, stronger, different, you've got neuroadaptation. You've got significant brain damage. And it does. And if you look at the systems, the CB1 receptors take care of. The brain's a big one. That's on the CB1 side. But I want you to look at the immune system. It's not only on the CB1 side, but even more receptors on the CB2 side. I want you to remember that. It's very important. The immune system. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Here's where the marijuana receptors of the CB1s are located, the pink dots. And I have a white X up there, and that's going to be where the empathy is, right here, where the eyebrows are. This is the empathy area. This is the THC receptors in here. And then we're going to look at that on brain scans, and we'll understand why we see more violence and suicide from marijuana. No-brainer. We're going to look at that. So again, where the receptors in the frontal lobe, where we make decisions, solve problems, and care about people and care about ourselves. That's all being affected here. And this part of the brain is the most placid. In other words, the easiest to change and the last to develop. And it's not finished developing on boys until age 28 to 30. On girls, 26 to 28. So yes, you are the smarter gender. You do mature quicker than we do, and you can multitask better than we can.
Yes, again.
And that means a happy marriage, if you understand that, guys. If you go back on the top of the brain, this is a parietal lobe. This is the higher level of thinking. And a kid will come to me and they say, we got guys on the honor roll that smoke pot. I said, what percent compared to C students? More or less. Oh, there's not as many as C students. I said, well, how about your dropouts? And this is what they always say. Oh, they all use. And I'll grant and I'll say, in my business, we call that a clue. And if you come back around to the cerebellum, right here, about the size of a fist, they call that a Greek word for little brain. Why? It has as many brain cells as the entire rest of the brain. It's as heavy as the rest of the brain. Why is it so dense and compacted? Speed. This is the fastest part of your brain. What does it do? Coordinates hand and eye motion, but thought process. Now, here's an experiment you could do that would be fun. Go online, try to find a Cheech and Chong movie. Close your eyes. Listen to the movie. Notice they talk rhythmically or in groups. And normally, you can hear my inflection, it's going like this. Their inflection, cerebellum. Then come into the backward C at the bottom of that. That's your hippocampus. That's where we store memory. John Duncan will say if someone gets stoned once a week, and you get pretty good high, within 2 years, they will lose 50% of their ability to store memory. If you want to know why college freshmen are dropping out, pot and booze. And pot's a big one because it impairs memory. Ask Willie Nelson. He will publicly tell you he has to quit occasionally because he forgets the words to the songs he wrote. Yeah. Memory. And all of them know that. And if you look at the Reward Center, DSM-5 manual told us a long time ago, marijuana is more addicting than alcohol. Marijuana is more addicting than alcohol. 1 out of 10 people will get addicted to alcohol if you start drinking alcohol. 1 in 7 will on marijuana. And if they're a teen, 1 in 6. Yep, kids get addicted quicker. Very important to understand about the brain is the patterns. And I didn't have time to show the video, but I wanted you to know that well, first let me ask you, how many have sphenopalatine gig neuralgia? It's a big word like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Just say a big word isn't impressive. But that's brain freeze. If you drink cold stuff too quick or eat ice cream too quick, now you can impress your kids. Did you have sphenopalatine gig neuralgia? But what that is brain freeze, and you have a sensor on the roof of your mouth that gets the pattern, I'm about to be froze to death, and gives you pain to stop. That's part of the brake system of the brain is pain. Don't do that anymore, it hurts. And it gives you that pain. And the thing of it is, there's no one that dies from brain freeze. Ice cream won't kill you that way. So let the front part of your brain tell the lizard part of the brain, don't hurt me because this can't kill me. Guess what? You're still going to get pain. And there's a link I've got on the bottom there, and it's about a police officer who took marijuana home. His wife baked it up in brownies, and they ate it, and they got what is called time compression. That's what marijuana does to the hippocampus because it measures time. He called 911. He's a trained police officer. He knows it's recorded. And he tells them, him and his wife ate marijuana, and they think they're dying because it's going real slow. Well, she's asking questions like all 911 operators will do to get more information, and he says, hurry up, we're dead. Not we're dying, we are dead. And he's an intelligent, well-trained police officer. And if you think that's not a problem, call poison control. It's an easy number, 1-800-222-1222. It's all 802s except the fourth to last is 1222. And tell them I'm a parent, I'm a whatever, and I want to know the statistics on how many panic attacks you're having coming into the ER. And most of them are saying, I think I'm dying. It's not a small problem. And he could be sitting here and said, you seen dead people? Yeah. They talk? No. Well, you're talking to me, I know, but I'm dead. You know, that's the power of patterns. Very powerful. Patterns are more powerful than the thinking part. Now, these are the slides I wanted you to look at to see, and there's 4 different brain scans, and it's the bottom of the brain looking up. So at the top of the slide is the top of the front of the brain, but it's the underneath side. And you see those 2 consistent areas that there's not much activity, it looks like holes? That's where your empathy is. Don't we see a consistent pattern here on why marijuana smokers don't care, are committing more suicides? And in Colorado, since 2006, they've had more adolescent suicides related to marijuana use than alcohol use. And violence is going up. And I put it might not show up very well, but there's a full yellow balloon there, and that's a balanced brain, which means the frontal lobe, the limbic system, the vital area, they're all balanced like they should be. That little poodle in a twisted balloon is a drug brain. You notice there's not much air in the tail or everywhere there's a twist? Well, that's the holes that you're seeing there. There's not much activity. So that's what the drugs do. It limits the activity. This is slides going down the brain, here, here, here. The top one is a normal brain. The bottom one is a marijuana user. If you look at the one on the farthest to your left, that's the same shot, and you see top to bottom, less imagery. You go to the second one, top to bottom, less imagery. Less image, less activity, less intelligence. Marijuana does make you dumber. Absolute. This is a corpus callosum. That's that bridge between the left and right hemisphere. You see a normal one and how thick and rich it is, and look how much less it is on a daily smoker. And let me say this about what you see coming down the pike. It's around 11 or 14%, depending on who you read, of the people who drink alcohol with a problem that consume about 80% of the alcohol. If you're a careful, responsible drinker, the alcohol industry really doesn't care about you. They target that 11 to 14% because they buy about 80%. Do you know who the marijuana industry is going to target? Your daily pot smokers. And that's what they want to get them to be. That's where the money is going to be, is daily pot smoking. Not weekly, not monthly. And monthly is regular heavy marijuana use because it's fat soluble, stays in the brain so long. If you smoke it once a month, you're never clear of marijuana. Never. Once a month is often. Once a week is heavy. Anything less than once a week is chronic. They want daily pot smokers. This is Dr. Daniel Amen, has the most slides on file of any medical person that I'm aware of. And he's researching brains and studying them before he treats these patients. He has some very strong things. I hope the volume comes across clear for you.
Teenagers who smoke marijuana or use marijuana in any form have a higher risk of anxiety, depression, suicide in their 20s. Teenagers who use marijuana, and this is a replicated study from Norway, have a 450% increased risk of becoming psychotic. And I'm the one over the last 40 years that I get to deal with marijuana triggered a psychotic episode, and they're still not well.
Kind of put things in perspective, because he researches a lot of different things. it's not just about drugs, it's all brain health. And if you look him up, he's under amenclinics.com, and clinics is plural, one word, Amen Clinics, like amen. So it should be easy to remember in a church. But he's looking for what ages the brain. It had nothing to do about anything but what ages the brain. And he looked at, 62,000 slides on this one, was it? Yeah, 62,000 brains. He's looked at it, and the number one thing that ages the brain quickest is schizophrenia. Number two, marijuana. Marijuana also causes schizophrenia. Double-edged sword. And he's telling this interviewer they were blown away because they thought it would be alcohol. It's not. The second fastest thing to age the brain is marijuana. And if you notice, those receptors were all over the brain. It is the most common receptor in the brain. And this is some of the disorders that's recognized. Chronic psychosis, anxiety disorders, and guess what a pot smoker says they use pot for? Anxiety. And guess what it causes? Yeah. And by the way, you can take pictures of all the slides. If you want copies, let us know. We'll try to figure out a way to get them to you. I don't sell my material. John and I, when we went into this, we're not doing it for the money. And I'm not doing this for any kind of accolade, but I know there's some people sometimes who are pro-marijuana. Well, what are you doing? It's making a lot of money. I'm not charging anybody anything. We're saving kids. Kids are more important. I have no conflict of interest. I have no gain except helping you all have healthier, safer families and communities. That's all there is to it. So there's people that's got driven means to do things, but folks, this is purely for what's best for what you want for your community. Anxiety disorder, violent disorder. Pot is not a calm drug. I can, and the old marijuana, I could have marijuana smokers wanting to kill me in 2 minutes. And I wasn't attacking them. I was educating them on the science of their drug. But they hated me for talking about their drug negative. Very fierce protectors. Cannabis intoxication, of course. A use disorder, which means they have an addiction problem. Induced psychosis and induced delirium. This is CDC. or ONDCP. I use a lot of different sources to say the same thing, so you know it's just not one entity talking about this. And this is, kids are self-medicated. Kids have puberty pits. You know, one day they're on top of the world, the next day they're carrying the world on their shoulders. That's normal adolescent development. Put in marijuana and you've got severe depression and more likely suicide. This is a doctor in Pueblo, Colorado. They had a state physicians conference where there's hundreds of doctors there. And he's presenting. I've got the link there underneath in the middle, so you can take a picture and go to that link. You'll hear his about 14-minute presentation. And he says in Pueblo, Colorado, and he's a chief pediatrician at that hospital there, 1 out of every 14 births has marijuana brain damage. And this is in 2016. And he went on to say in his presentation, with the 2.5% THC, doctors and pediatricians saw in their clients of children lower school performance, spatial reasoning, problem solving, frontal lobe, short-term memory, hippocampus, less likely to graduate high school, motivation, don't reach academic potential. And that's on 2.5%. And he says, what are we going to see on 15%? Father can contribute. In fact, you'll see father or mother that uses marijuana before birth, their child, if they're exposed to an opiate, will much more likely to be addicted to that opiate than a child from parents that didn't use marijuana. because opiates use the same brain receptors that marijuana does. Marijuana and opium, marijuana and heroin do not go good together. Marijuana and alcohol does not go good together. Marijuana and ecstasy just really multiplies the impact on lost memory. So marijuana doesn't play well specifically with certain other drugs, and people don't talk about that. And psychosis, suicide, you see, and this is 2.5%. Folks, they're saying this a long time ago. It's not new stuff. In Colorado, the doctors are saying, the hospitals, children are coming in with burns and cyclic vomiting and mental issues, and it's overwhelming the hospital because of kids getting into candy that they think, and it's THC. And what I mean by cyclic vomiting, it's called scromating because it's screaming vomiting. We're not talking about a few hours here. We're talking about weeks. Let's see, okay. The orange one that says 12%, that's 1 week. And that's day and night. The next one over, the green one, that's 2 weeks. And I think it's 3 weeks, a month. The one on top, more than a month. And they don't know how to stop it. And if you ever get scromating, now it's common in heavy young users that keep using heavily. But on a child, because the younger the organ, the quicker and more severe the impact. That's true on everything. The younger the child, the more severe and dramatic the impact. That's why adolescents shouldn't drink alcohol. I know that might not sit well with some of you, but that's the science. No kid should drink before 21. Ideally, 25. But we're not an ideal country. But no child should drink or toke or do a drug of abuse under 25. Shouldn't happen. And that's screaming vomiting. Now, to show you the dedication of a marijuana addict, this young woman in the center is at a marijuana conference. She is a PR person for the marijuana industry. She got scromating. And once you get it, you can't use any marijuana product or it'll erupt in you again. It's a permanent illness so far as they know. They haven't found a way to cure it. So she waited, tried out, but then thought she might use CBD, cannabinoid that you see on the streets and in the shops. And she said, worst 16 days of my life. Worse than the scromatin before. And she wants to get it cured so she can go back to using it. That's the marijuana dedication. Okay, if we're going to look at the industry of medical marijuana, let's look at the true medical. Now, when I was a police officer, there's all kinds of little secrets about money that we know to find counterfeits. But the very quickest test of a counterfeit, if I got a suspect bill, I ask someone for the same denomination and put it side by side. That's the quickest, easiest way to tell counterfeit money. Let's do that with marijuana. Let's put it beside the real stuff. How many patients go in on real medicine and tell the doctor the drug they want? How many say, I don't want an examination and don't have to get it? How many medicines are just recommended? And you know why a doctor recommends? Well, one reason is they prescribe it, it's against federal law, and they lose their license. But let's say we can change that federal law and say, Doc, we've changed it. You can now prescribe marijuana. No. What do you mean no? No. Well, why not? Because if I prescribe it, I'm held accountable. If I recommend, I am not held accountable. Think about it. Is there any medicine the doctor prescribes that they're not held accountable for? No, because they're prescribing it. They will never prescribe marijuana because then they're held accountable. And does this look like a doctor's office to you? And you know, in South Dakota, I've been told that they set up medical clinics in strip joints and taverns in your state. Does that look like they're trying to do medicine? And here's what you're seeing in the marijuana. Folks, this is fungus, this is contaminants, heavy metals, THC. There is junk. It's not being regulated. And if they say it's 80% THC, it might be 95% or 40%. There's no regulation on what's in there, and no one's testing for it. Ask them. Call them and ask them. Tar Heel's regulating. What machine are you using? Use a mass spectrometer? How do you do random testing? How do you do it? Don't let them give you some kind of general, oh, well, we make periodic checks. That means they might drive by and look, oh, well, there's another shop. That could be a periodic check. Don't let them get away with that. And when you go in there, guess what? They give you a pain chart. Why do they use pain? Easiest to fake, hardest to confirm. And look on their pain chart. If you have zero pain, you qualify for mellow yellow medicine. What? I don't have any pain, doc, so what medicine can I get for that? Self-reporting. Now, here's one that you get one of these aha moments, and I said, okay, well, I know in the PDR, Physician's Desk Reference, all those categories have to be answered on all the drugs. Look at all the categories. Marijuana's not answering any of them. So I went to a legal medicine that comes from marijuana. It isn't marijuana. It's called Marinol. THC Marinol. It's synthesized, it is purified, and they use it as a medicine. So therefore, it's in the medical guide and in the PDR. So I went to Marinol, and I looked up drug interactions. And this is on 12-point printing. 60 pages of adverse interaction with other medicines. That's purified medical dose. Here's medical dose, here's high. I'm going to show you a slide on that. They're not using medical index of medical doses. They're using this much. So what do you think that would be there? But they don't even do it. How many are smoked? Think of anything you want, organic or fiber, anything in the world. What can we set on fire, combust it, and suck the particles in our lungs and think it's going to be healthy for us? And why did they let them smoke it during COVID? That's therapeutic index. And what that is there's only a point where the volume or purity gives you the safest, administer the dose with the fewest adverse reaction. Fewest. Never absent. Fewest. And it says on marijuana, very narrow window as a major reason for discontinuing it, because it has a very narrow therapeutic dose, if any at all. Here is that on the left, that's what would be a recommended dose if you were doing a milligram of dosage of using it as a medicine. That's 30%, 300 times more, or 80%, 800 times over therapeutic dose. If you take 800 times over therapeutic dose on aspirin, you're going to die. In fact, you could do that on drinking water. If you take 800 times the therapeutic dose of drinking water, people have died. Water poisoning, it happens. Rare, but that's what they're doing. This is doing a check to see on pain relief, and they took 38 subjects. Almost a third of them got relief on nothing. It's called a placebo dose. So all these people say, well, I tried it, and it relieved my knee pain. What was the placebo effect? And on the middle group that got medium relief, they were about 3.5 THC, and it was 57%. But look at 1.29. They got a 61% relief. Less, not more. But they're given more. This is a PDR, talking about the circulatory, respiratory, and reproductive. I wish we had time to talk about that because that gives me a huge amount of concern on the reproductive impact. Well, here's the American Lung Association, and look at what they say. It's devastating to the lung. It hurts it. And this is right directly from the American Lung Association. So why did they let it happen during COVID? It lowers your immune system. It hurts the lung. It causes phlegm that impairs the lung. So why did they outlaw that? Here's your Heart Association, and look at what they say. It's adverse strokes, heart attacks. Well, yeah, you're taking a heart from 70 beats per minute and jumped it to at least 120, 130 beats per minute. And your blood pressure went up. This is the American Society of Addictive Medicine. Marijuana doesn't meet our standards. It will not be approved. Here's your FDA statement. It's not safe, it's not effective, and every dose is different. We can't approve this as medicine. Marijuana cannot qualify for a medicine. You hear what I'm saying? Can't qualify as a medicine. Every dose is different. Here's your medical statements from your American Medical Association, and here's the sickness of it. People say, oh, you can smoke for glaucoma and release inner eye pressure. Yep, it does. For about an hour and a half, give or take, plus or minus. But if you don't dose every hour and a half, and this according to the National Eye Institute, that rebound pressure comes back doing further damage to the eye. And then they'll say to immune person with AIDS deficiency, immune deficiency, oh, if you got a lack of appetite, smoke marijuana to get the munchies. Remember CB1, CB2, both had compromising the immune system. What's keeping an AIDS patient alive? Their immune system. Why would you tell them to take something that's going to lower it further? These people are parasites. That means they feed off the misery of others to get what they want. Who would tell a glaucoma patient to smoke pot? Who would tell an AIDS patient to smoke pot? Who would tell a soldier or a police officer, firefighter, or anyone else with post-traumatic stress disorder to smoke pot? It causes depression. But that's what they're pushing. This is Excuse Marijuana, Dr. Eric Voth. And there is no medical area that marijuana can address to help. None determined in medical science. I'm sorry, you want to take a picture? Go ahead. I take good direction, so yell at me if you need to. And we don't vote on it. If we're going to vote on it, I'd like to vote on no gravity. Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah. Do you think if the United States 100% voted for no gravity, we'd be the only country on Mother Earth that didn't have gravity? You can't vote on science. Nonsense. And they circumvent our safety system. Now here's further proof of the pudding. We, GW Pharmaceuticals, researched and took years, but they got Epidiolex approved. That's a medical term for CBD. And you know, if they grow marijuana to make CBD, they don't use that field for 7 years. Because if they use it before then, there's cross-contamination from the last crop. How many minutes do you think the marijuana growers are given between crops? So they extracted, stabilized, sanitized, and made into consistent doses CBD. This is medical. This is what the shops are giving here in town. And look what they say. Watch out for mood alterations, suicidal thoughts, and liver damage. And then they say there that the suicidal thoughts isn't really a big percent. It's only 1 out of 500. All right? What are they saying? We have about 25 to 30 million marijuana users regularly. And I asked Travis, I said, you got a calculator? And he said, yeah. And I said, take 25 million and divide it by 500. And the answer was 50,000 suicidal tendencies if you take CBD, medical level, not clinic level. Are we getting the picture? And what does Hardee's do? On April the 20th, 420, what a coincidence. CBD sauce on their hamburgers. And in Colorado, where my family live, they have to ask when they order ice cream or muffins or any other food product, have you put any marijuana product in that food? They don't have to tell you. You know, when you go to Denver, better be careful what you order and where you order. This is the thing I don't get about COVID marijuana. They wanted you to get the COVID shot. And you know how they enticed you to come in? We'll give you a joint. J's for jabs. Folks, hospitals did this. Why? Look what it did to the lung. And these states said, we're going to keep marijuana stores open because it's essential. And the Colorado mayor said, why? And he said, well, people need an escape. Did you notice? His quote was not that they needed medication, an escape. That was a direct quote. Because they had outlawed it, and in 2 hours, the lobbyists of the marijuana community put them back on television and reversed that rule in 2 hours. That's all it took to reverse the order. It's just absolute nonsense. If you ask any marijuana smoker, they'll say that they drive more careful and focused and slow. Well, this is our DRE data where we find people driving impaired on marijuana. Look at the number one thing that we find in marijuana smokers. Speeding. Out of 302 research cases, 2 were going slower than the speed limit. 300 were speeding. Just the opposite of what they thought. But this is the result. And this was in St. Louis County. People very close to me worked this crash. First responders had a terrible time with this. I won't give you the details. No sense hurting your brain. But the young man that hit them was a marijuana smoker with marijuana in his work truck, come across all 4 lanes of the highway and hit these 4 beautiful people head on and killed all 4. He lived. A drug recognition state coordinator, highest level in the state highway patrol, eval'd this driver, deemed him under the influence of marijuana. The prosecuting attorney, who was funded by George Soros to work the case in the counties, went on local television and told people this accident was not caused by marijuana. Now, who do you believe? George Soros, political attorney, or one of the top DRE evaluators in the state of Missouri, who I personally know. Yeah. These, people told me one time, statistics are nothing but numbers with the tears wiped away. Here's the tears. Each one of these children were killed by marijuana medical drivers. They had medical marijuana cards, and they were separate crashes. This young lady just graduated from college. This medical marijuana driver was going over 80 miles an hour in town. Not unusual. And here's one that you got to pay attention to. You remember this guy that killed these 4 beautiful children and brutal, and it was all in the news? Never once have I heard drugs mentioned. I'm watching my television, and this is my television screen with my camera, and they're scrolling. They did a search warrant, and they were listing all the evidence, and it was just scrolling by. And I thought, oh, wait, what? And I stopped it, went back and froze it, and in police language, green leafy plant material is marijuana. You see 2 different containers of green leafy plant material, and no one's ever mentioned that. This was a sprint car racer, high on marijuana, that thought he was bumped by another driver, walked into a moving race car because he's mad at it and was killed. He was high on marijuana. Toxicology confirmed, pit crew confirmed, and his actions confirmed. Michael Brown in Ferguson, high on marijuana, and the officer said, halt, you're under arrest. And there'd already been a shot gone off in the car where he fought over the officer's gun and hit the officer and wounded, Michael wounded himself. He's so many feet away, and the officer says, halt, you're under arrest. 10 individual separate witnesses said Michael turned around, gave a little jump like a football player, charged the officer, and the officer started shooting him because he knew he couldn't win in a physical fight. He was bigger than the officer, and the officer was big. And he was wounding the guy. And Mike stopped, and the officer quit firing. Michael thought about it a moment, and he started running again, so the officer started shooting again, wounding him again. Michael stopped again. The officer stopped shooting again. Michael thought about it again and then charged the officer for the 3rd time. And the last round was the fatal round. This is an 87-page report in DOJ. You can read it yourself. Michael Brown was psychotic on marijuana. But you didn't hear that in the media. In fact, I've had people walk out on me if I try to talk about this. I've even said, look, I'll not say anything. Here's the link to the 87-page report that came to crucify the officer. That was their mission stated by the President of the United States and the Attorney General of the United States. Go find evidence against the officer. That was a public statement on public television. They came to hang the officer, but the evidence exonerated the officer. And people would walk out when I just said, I won't say anything. There's the link. Go read the reports yourself. This is what eyes normally look like if you're on a school drug, which is stimulants, cannabis, and hallucinogens. They're dilated. If it's on narcotics, it's pinpointed. That's what we look for. Drugs either change the size or the movement. This is the movement. And Tony, can you put your mouse on that picture and click it? If you can move the point, yeah, you got it. Move the point, there, click it. All right, this is horizontal gaze nystagmus. This is a depressant drug. And if you've got high on a depressant drug or inhalant drug, your eyes won't go smooth back and forth, they jerk. So drugs either change the way the eyes move or the size of it. That would be like alcohol or depressants. That's what it looked like. Can you do that again, Tony, on the marijuana eye? Go back one there. You have to be on it. Go back one. Yeah. Okay. And on that, now click it. And what you're going to see on marijuana is what we call pupillary unrest or dilation rebound. and you put a light in the eye, a pen light, and it'll constrict, but then it'll try to dilate, reconstrict, redilate, about the rate of a heartbeat. But each time it gets bigger, doesn't go back to its original size. And that's what we've been looking at on marijuana for decades. Now, this young lady was a case of mine, and she was high on what she called budkine, about 15% THC. And she's supposed to take both eyes up and both go up evenly. But look at how one eye stops and the other eye goes up. See that? We've never seen that until high-grade marijuana, and only on high-grade marijuana. And what I'm going to call high-grade, 15% in that neighborhood and up. Now, the next one was Nevada. We have a city named after the state, but we say Nevada and they say Nevada. So this gentleman, 90% THC, and look at his eyes. That's all he had in his system is THC. It was 90. It'll come in close again, and I think you'll be able to see it. Yeah. This is your new marijuana. And let me preface this. We don't know what this means. We have to research this. We don't know what this is telling us. But it's telling us the new marijuana is profoundly affecting the brain different than anything we've ever seen before. We know that.
Yes or no? Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
This will be
I
interesting.
believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
It's addicting. Every one of them said that. And then they looked at how they promoted tobacco. And what they did is they put committees to confuse the issue. They didn't have to prove health claims were true or false. They just confused people. And they said, well, ice cream isn't good for you. We outlaw ice cream. Silly comments like that's what they're doing with marijuana. And you know why they're doing that? Because marijuana, tobacco, and alcohol, they own each other now. Anheuser-Busch is up to their ears in marijuana business. Coors is. Cheap tobacco companies are. I'm talking about the dirt cheap the company. They've invested in. They own each other. It is no longer just big. And what's tobacco companies still doing? Nicotine candy. Well, it worked on marijuana. Why shouldn't it work on nicotine? They own each other. They help each other sell each other's product. There's alcohol and marijuana, but it doesn't go good together. Anheuser-Busch invests over $500,000 on investing. And then guess what? Coca-Cola Company, Pepsi and Coke, they went in on the action, so they're looking at cannabinoid components they can get into sodas. But the big three is what's going to control the marijuana market: tobacco, alcohol, marijuana. Some of your marijuana CEOs were with a tobacco company. And what we're going to see, because of all this power in that, we're going to see things ignored. In Colorado, if you grow marijuana, you have mold in your house, black mold, or anywhere else you grow marijuana. Terrible health to grow it in the house. And you know, in Colorado, there's no law to force you to tell people you grew marijuana in your home. You can sell that to someone else and you don't have to tell them. And when you are water shortage in California, and if you water your lawn, you can get fined, then why, with hundreds of tents, and all of them are full of marijuana, and every plant takes 7 gallons per plant per day. 150 million gallons to harvest. And they don't get punished. But if you water your lawn, you get a ticket. Making sense? And it's not going to stop with pot. This is crystalline THC. This is Fry from DEA. You know what Fry is? Formaldehyde mixed in with THC. And if you smoke that, it acts like PCP. Folks, it's not going to stop with pot. You're already hearing ground rumors on medical shrooms. Now you hear Aaron Rodgers endorsing it. Folks, you're going to hear a lot more about shrooms. And they're going to do the same thing they did with marijuana. Vaping being healthy. No, it's not. It's far worse than regular smoking. And this, next to the last slide. In 1928, Edward Bernays in marketing said, we now know how to market to people without them knowing it and can control them. You know how they do it? They'll bring in men in research marketing of a picture of their mother, and they're fond of their mother. They've bonded with their mom. And they'll have them look at their mom and do a composite of all these brain scans to see what part of the brain lights up. And then they will show different types of marketing on products that light the same area up without lighting up the alarm area. That's how they market to us. It's a science. And they do that politically and mercantile. Yeah, they do it politically, folks. George Soros studies this. And he knows by your internet activity, whatever you're on, your profile. And he will tell his people running for office to cater to your profile to get elected. And then he'll do his profile once elected. Pogo says, we've met the enemy, and it's us. Folks, that's right. We're the ones in control. We're the ones that need to be involved in government, but we need to be educated. That's why I want you to think for yourself. If I was a slick talker that could come in here and convince you of stuff, someone better than me is going to come behind me and switch you the other way. That's why I don't want you to believe me. I don't want you to buy what I'm saying. I just want you to think about it, research it yourself, but use credible sources. Don't use blogs and opinions. Use credible sources. And see what you think, and then let's do something. And I'm telling you, and there's something that dawned on me early on, I realized this. If we don't tolerate it, the community doesn't have the problem. If you don't want the problem, don't tolerate it. And there's ways you can do that, not to tolerate. And that's the last slide I'll leave up here, because this is your resource slide. And I had almost a 6-minute video. But
here's a medical miracle for you. A drug that relieves pain, reduces anxiety, improves your mood, and has no side effects. Too good to be true? Well, millions of Americans believe that drug is marijuana. Are they right? I'm a physician, board-certified internist, and addiction medicine specialist. I've treated thousands of people whose addictions to opiates, alcohol, and other drugs were wrecking their relationships, their careers, and their lives. I'm telling you, marijuana can be both harmful and addictive, just like many other substances. What I've seen firsthand for 20 years is now becoming obvious to other doctors and researchers. Increased use of marijuana is leading to increased psychosis, bipolar mania, and even spontaneous vomiting, especially in adolescents and young adults. The younger the user, the less developed their brain, the more harmful the drug. Hate to burst your bubble, but that is the science. A 2022 Gallup survey found 30% of Americans between 18 and 34 use marijuana. When scientists at the University of Michigan asked young adults between 19 and 30 if they'd used it within the past month, 29% said yes in 2021, compared to 21% in 2016 and 17% in 2011. Daily marijuana use across all ages nearly doubled from 6% in 2011 to 11% in 2021. That translates into over 13 million Americans compared with 5 million in the decade before. There's no such thing as a bad drug. They are just molecules that affect human physiology. Most Americans use some form of a recreational substance, but ignoring or denying potential adverse effects creates a potential for serious harm. There's no free lunch with Mother Nature, so there are always side effects. My goal here is not to shame or scare anyone, but to raise awareness so you can make informed decisions. Speaking of that, keep in mind that marijuana has gone corporate. According to Forbes, legal marijuana is now a $20 billion industry and growing. There's a lot of vested interest in making sure you don't hear the bad news. But there are risks. And the more you use and the higher the concentrations, the more the risk. Of course, most people who use marijuana won't have a psychotic break, develop bipolar disorder, or become schizophrenic, just as most people who drink don't develop alcoholic liver disease or alcohol dementia. Some individuals, and not a small number, will have a significant reaction to marijuana, and there's no way to know in advance. You won't know until it happens, and then it might be too late. It wasn't always like this. The marijuana people use today is not the weed of my generation. It hasn't been for at least 2 decades. What changed? The answer is found in 3 letters: THC. THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, the main psychoactive or mind-altering component of cannabis. It's what gets you high. Keith Humphreys, a Stanford University professor of psychiatry and drug policy advisor to Presidents Bush and Obama, testified to a Rhode Island State Senate committee that THC concentrations had increased from 3% in the 80s up to over 20% in 2017. According to the New York Times in 2023, that figure is now nearing 100% THC, a 30-fold increase. And as the stuff gets stronger, so do its effects. The 2021 National Survey on Drug Use and Health found that among the 52 million Americans 12 and older who used marijuana in the past month, 16 million were addicted. So nearly 1/3 of users can't quit, at least not without help, despite the drug's negative effects on their lives. In 2023, JAMA Psychiatry published a study of marijuana habits among 6.5 million Danes over the age of 16. The study found that marijuana addicts were twice as likely as non-users to be diagnosed with clinical depression and up to 4 times as likely to develop bipolar disorder with psychotic symptoms. A study in Norway, also published in 2023, concluded that among people who had no pre-existing mental health issues who'd had a psychotic incident after using marijuana, 27% develop what has been characterized as schizophrenia. Are you with me? 1 out of 4 perfectly healthy people who started using marijuana on a regular basis developed a severe mental disorder. Some of them were my patients. 2 of them were my family members. 1 developed an addiction, 1 psychosis. They're now both fine but required treatment. They are among the lucky ones. But others weren't so lucky. Joshua Jimenez started using at 14 and was hospitalized 3 times for marijuana-induced psychosis. He committed suicide in 2021. He was 22. Kevin Bright was 15 when he started using marijuana to allegedly self-medicate for depression. 3 years later, he suffered his first psychotic break. He ended his life at 29. Joshua and Kevin are not simply anecdotes. A 2023 JAMA study found that cannabis-linked attempted suicides have increased at an average rate of 17% a year. Still want to take that miracle drug that relieves pain, reduces anxiety, improves your mood, and has no side effects? I'm Dr. Drew Pinsky for Prager University.
Yes, sir.
Well, I do security at the hospital. We find meth in the hospital quite a bit, and the PD won't even come out with meth. So we make this marijuana illegal here. What is PD going to do about it? If they're not even come from meth.
Well, what is happening in law enforcement, 2 things. Some of it is political, and they begin to, like up in Oregon and Washington, where they've really handicapped the police, and Austin, Texas, and other places, and they are so overwhelmed they can't address things. Do you know there's police departments now telling people they won't respond to certain calls? We had a sheriff in a northwestern county in a northwestern state that the husband that had a court order against him was banging on the door and said, if he gets in, he's going to hurt me or kill me. And so, well, try to calm him down, talk nice, because we don't have an officer we can send to you. He broke the door down and murdered her. Yeah. Yes, sir. He's asking, would it ever be legal for an officer to have a medical marijuana card? Here's what can happen. In Canada, they legalized marijuana. So the police officer said, well, it's illegal. What about us? Well, in Toronto, they said if you've used it in the last, I think it was 60 or 90 days, you can't come to work, which means, you basically can't use it because you don't get vacation as long as they're going back. So they're saying, no, you can't. Do you know what Vancouver said? If you feel fit for duty, come on to work. If you got high 5 minutes from coming on and you feel like you're okay, which who is the poorest judge of your level of impairment? The impaired person. And do you want this officer, if I'm a partner, do I want to ride with this person? Do I want this person to come on a call to me and he got stoned 5 minutes before coming to work? But that's Vancouver's rule. So the answer is, it depends on the politics in the area. If your politicians are pro-pot, they'll probably say no big deal. If they're anti, like Toronto, we don't want you to come to work if you've been using marijuana. Rightly so. Yes?
3 quick questions. First one, Dr. Dobson today on Facebook and yesterday, all of a sudden his picture, and he's advertising CBD. I'm going, there's no way that the industry is just using him and he'll eventually have to sue him and it'll be long gone by the time he's right.
There is a big industry of doing this, and what's a very well-known evangelist minister.
Yeah.
And they had him promoting marijuana products and whatever, all bogus, all fraud. Yep. 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 And it's all bogus. Yeah. Yep. True.
And then that one slide that you had like 8 different types of marijuana, wax and stuff like that.
Oh yes. Yeah,
so what's the percentage of people now that are smoking them or just dabbing them with just THC dabs, or what's the percentage of?
Well, in some areas it depends on an area. There are some DREs that say they don't see any plant material at all. It's all oils and waxes and extracts, which is normally somewhere between, most of it is between 40 and 80%, but you have it a little lower sometimes, and some areas you don't see much below 90% at all because they're all heavy users maxing out. And they'll get accustomed to that and they'll have to do something stronger. Yes. Well, again, is that a placebo effect? Because if I gave everyone here an M&M and told you it'd lower your blood pressure, well, I had high blood pressure, about a third of you would get lowered blood pressure. In fact, we have got, and if I've got any medical people in the audience, help me validate this as being true, within recent years, there is an actual placebo medicine. And what I mean by that is the doctor and the patient both know it's placebo. But the doctor tells the patient, take this at a certain time each day with a belief it's going to help you. And it does. So placebo medicine is a valid, legitimate. So why isn't it a surprise that people using marijuana that might not be being helped believe they are? And let's say they are being helped. What's your trade-off? What's your therapeutic index? Where is it that your adverse isn't bigger than your benefit? They don't know. Anything else? Yes.
So I work in a lot of like convenience stores and gas stations and places like that. What's Delta 8? And where does that come in?
What's Delta 8, he asked. And there are, I think, 400 or plus chemicals in marijuana. Of course, when you put a match to it or burn it, it turns into 2,000 to 4,000 products that come in your body, just like tobacco does. Many more products when you combust it. That's why you don't smoke anything. But there's over 100 what they call cannabinoids. And so far, I say so far because we haven't researched every plant, but as of today, no other plant has cannabinoids except the Cannabis sativa indica type plant. And out of those 100 cannabinoids, 7 of them are psychoactive. THC is the highest psychoactive, but there's also the Delta 8, the Delta 10, Delta 11, and they're weaker. However, what they're doing now is they can tweak those chemical compounds and make them stronger. And they can take some of the other deltas and convert them. They can even convert CBD into Delta 9 THC. So we're just on the threshold of what they can do with chemical manipulation to really ramp up what the drug's going to do to you. So those other 7 cannabinoid psychoactive might not stay weaker than Delta 9. And that's what they're doing. They're just finding out what works and what they can enhance.
So it's just marijuana?
It's still marijuana, correct, yeah. Well, marijuana is the crude combination, and when you reduce it, it's no longer, it's like ethanol, alcohol that we get from corn. It's no longer corn. It's ethanol. So marijuana is the crude term for all the crude chemicals coming out. So when you start taking away some of the chemicals, it's no longer the crude, gross, inclusive everything marijuana. It's less than marijuana. But they call everything marijuana anyway. But anything else? Yes.
Where are they mixing all these things?
Where are they
Where
what?
are they performing all these things to decide what plants got this and that in it?
They have, just like the pharmaceutical company, they pay big bucks to chemists that research and do this. For instance, where we got our K2 spice and synthetic cannabinoids, that would come from like Dr. John Huffman and Pfizer University and Hebrew University. They were researching stable chemical compounds of different components of the cannabinoids, and it got out in the market, which is never meant to be human consumed, and that's where you get your synthetic cannabinoids. So you have researchers and folks, I want to say this carefully. China, communist leaders are, you can't believe how huge of a problem they are for us. And I say that carefully because I lived in Germany for a year and a half. And I would never say the German people, because the German people were against the war. And most German people didn't go along with Hitler. So it was a German political machinery of World War II. The same is about China. I'm not talking about the Chinese people. I'm talking about the Chinese government. Fentanyl, synthetic cannabinoids, TikTok, folks, that's a bad, bad thing. You need to look at China government is not a friend to our children. And they're heavily involved in this stuff, as is the cartel. Anything else? Yes.
I've seen a lot of supposedly healthy recipes using hemp seeds. And I was just wondering what you think about hemp seeds, if it's actually harmful product, or, I mean, what exactly is it?
Yeah. Well, number one, they're going to lie, so I don't trust anything you're going to sell me or tell me about it. But if it's true hemp, here's the difference between the variants of hemp and marijuana. If I want to make a high plant marijuana, I need a high Delta 9 number and no CBD. If I want to make a hemp plant, I've got to have a high CBD number and no THC. Now, if I have this, I can get hemp, I can get high on it, but it's not very good. To be as good as it can be, it has to be maximum contrast. So if it's truly hemp, it's supposed to be really concentrated in CBD. Remember what that slide said on the medical guide? Liver damage, suicidal tendencies. But now, saying that, I don't know if they've really put that much concentrate in what they're calling that. So I don't really know what's really in there. But if it's really high concentration of CBD, it's not going to be good. And they say, oh, it's got the omega-3 oil. Well, so does almost every other plant. You know, whoop-de-doo, you know. It's got water in it. Well, so does everything else. So I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't trust them. I don't think any byproduct of marijuana. Now, I do believe in, and I do want them to research marijuana, and we got Marinol, we got Sativex, we got Epidiolex, we got Navalone. Those are good things for some people. None of it is a big panacea, but it does help some people. So let's find more things in marijuana that can help people, but that'll never give the good reason to use it. Okay? Anything else?
Didn't you just say that the Marinol that you just said, didn't you say that has so many huge amounts of side effects?
Well, yes, but so does a lot of other medicines. That was in a physician's desk reference guide. So if you did other medicines, you would find other products that, oh, you don't use this with a good medicine. So that's why you have that, is a doctor needs to know, I'm going to give you this medicine, but I need to know what else you're on so it's not an adverse effect. So that is not abnormal to see Marinol have that many adverse chemical reactions. That's normal for some medical chemicals with other chemicals. The point is, they don't even look at that on crude marijuana. That's far more complicated than an isolated chemical compound for a medicine. So your street clinics are far worse than what I showed you. Travis, Brandon? And I'll hang around if you think of something. I'll hang around and answer your questions. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, I'm gonna get you guys out of here as soon as I can. Okay, I got just a real quick thing. If you guys can hang on just for another 10 minutes. Okay, let's see if it works. I'm an Apple guy, so, oh man, yeah. I can't see it either. Speech right down here in the corner. No, down, right there. That's it. There you go. All right. Okay. All right. So I usually read these, and I'm blind. So I think that says give South Dakota a second chance. You know, I went to one of Ed's meetings here, what's that been? 2-3 years ago, I think. And, you know, I've been to a lot of these things since then. And every time I ever went to one, it was like, downer. What are we going to do? We're all going to die. Our kids are all doomed. This is terrible. Well, the concerned citizens of South Dakota decided, okay, so what are we going to do about it? So we're looking for solutions. Why don't you go ahead and click to the next one there. We don't have any audio, do we? Oh, is this how I'd use it?
The orange side.
The orange side.
No, that one right there.
Oh, that one. Okay. Okay. I don't know if you can click on that, if we got any sound. Let's check that once. This is I want you to check something out. You see this lady down here next to the bald lady? That lady? I want you to watch her face, and if you can, listen to what he says. I just asked this lawyer, which is a pot grower.
Look it up in the Secretary of State.
What happened in 2022?
That's recreation. You voted for medical.
It's the same thing.
It's not the same.
Yes, it is. What's the difference between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana?
How it's sold and how it's marketed.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing, but it's not what was voted down. It was voted for. I mean, you're going to have to try to. Recreational was voted down.
It's the same plant, is what I'm saying.
Of course, it's the same plant.
Yeah.
That's. Of course,
Let's cut him off.
Before 2022.
That's our state's attorney. Yeah. She's been fighting us on getting marijuana into Butte County for 2.5 years now. She's all for it. So, anybody thinks that all government officials are good to go? Anyway. Yeah. But anyway, here's some things to remember. How many of you have read 34-20G? No, come on, guys. No one? There's usually one. But anyway, if you want to go read this law, you guys need to read this. You know, there's this big deal going on about property rights in South Dakota right now, and our jurisdictions are being taken away. They already did this in this law. Every municipality in the state of South Dakota has to allow for a marijuana dispensary. Doesn't sound very patriotic to me. One is marijuana, and there's some things you need to remember when you're reading this law. One is the marijuana industry wrote this law. It was not legislators, it wasn't citizens, it was the marijuana industry. Second, the health department is the only government agency which has any jurisdiction over the marijuana industry in South Dakota. Remember, that's a very key point. And third, as you read through this law, when it refers to the department, it is referring to the health department in South Dakota. Okay, I'm just going to run through them as fast as I can because I know you guys are tired and Ed gives up so much information, it's ridiculous. But sections 2 through 11 of this law protects anyone that has anything to do, you guys can read that, but it protects anybody that has anything to do with the marijuana industry in South Dakota. Everybody, doctors, lawyers, the guys that grow it, the guys that transport it, it's ridiculous. This is a letter that I received to my house after I put this petition through. Can you guys read it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. These are not good people. These people will come after you. They do me all the time. I'm at a little deal and my table's all dirty now back there. You guys kind of noticed that. I was at a basketball tournament last weekend here in Rapid City. And I was by myself most of the time. These people would come up and scream at me because I'm trying to take away their weed. I haven't had anybody do that with aspirin. That's what they always compare it to. Section 33 of this law allows for children under the age of 18 to acquire a medical marijuana card. And there is no age limit. None. Like, I don't know if you can click on that. You know, most people don't think about kids, you know, and marijuana. Here's a little video that I found. There's a kid smoking a bong. There's grandma. There's another person giving a kid a pipe. These are children at a hemp fest. Look at them up there at the stage. These people have no... I couldn't believe it. And I saw this, not in this environment, but I saw this when I'm out in the public and I'm trying to get signatures to repeal marijuana. You know what I see? Beautiful little children getting pulled around by a couple of dope heads. And I'll say, would you like to help me repeal marijuana in South Dakota? You know what they say? Everyone without exception, no, I like it. And they're packing these poor little kids around with them. I mean, just beautiful children. But anyway. Okay, let's see if I can get it to work here. Okay, Section 59 forces every municipality in the state to allow for at least one dispensary. This is a dispensary south of Newell. This is where I came from. That dispensary can be seen 7-8 miles away. I can see it from my house if I get up on the hill. And Butte County actually approved 15 different marijuana establishments in Butte County. Thankfully, well, I don't want to toot my own horn, but thankfully, an organization went after a bunch of these guys and they left. They had lied on their application. They'd not acquired a place for their water. You know, they were actually, that lawyer, we actually ran out of business, but that was kind of fun. Anyway, Section 66 allows for all these, I got to read that. Allows for the manufacturing of concentrates. You know, all these waxes and dabs and stuff that Ed was talking about. And they can be up to 99% THC. And, you know, they use really dangerous methods to get this kind of stuff. It's not just, you know, you go boil it down in a tube or something. It's serious, dangerous stuff. So in Section 80, I thought, wow, I finally got something in here, you know, that I studied this law hard. Section 80 states that the medical marijuana establishment license can be revoked if the department deems the complaint viable, such as selling marijuana to someone without a medical marijuana card. Now remember the department, the health department. And then I read Section 81, which states that you can only suspend them for 6 months. You can't get rid of them. And then Section 82 states that they can still cultivate and possess marijuana during their suspension, they just can't sell it. And remember, the health department enforces this, not the police. Section 95 mandates that school districts have to allow a caregiver to administer marijuana in school during school hours. And that's in school. That's in our schools, right? Oh, what'd I do? Okay. Section 51 lists the requirements to defend your use of marijuana or your use of medical marijuana in court, including practitioner's professional opinion. Section 53 states that you don't need a medical marijuana card to put up a defense of your use of medical marijuana in court. So essentially, you don't need a medical marijuana card. Did you guys know that? So like if Ed pulled you over and he goes, so I smell marijuana in the vehicle. You have a medical marijuana card? They go, no, I'm waiting on it. I got a binky. It's kind of hurting me. I got a busted knuckle from a pipe today. Right? You don't need a medical marijuana card. All they got to do is say they're using it for medical use. This is the clincher. You remember I was telling you how the department enforces all this? This one, they dug deep for this one. This was actually passed last session. SB 1 of last session enacted this. States which the department, the health department, may accept donations from private sources to reduce application and renewal fees. They legalized bribery. And that wasn't in the original law. This was passed by our Senate and put into law after this had been put through. There's a lot of peer that is invested in marijuana. Form 4473 of the U.S. Department of Justice states that you just lost your Second Amendment right if you get a medical marijuana card. Another thing is you can't have a CDL and use medical marijuana. If they catch you with any kind of marijuana on you, you can't have one. It says there, I can't read it very good, but it's it doesn't matter which state you're in. You cannot have a CDL, which it's a good thing. I keep pushing something too hard or something here. There we go. And I want to get you guys out of here as soon as possible. But if you guys wouldn't mind signing our petition on the way out the door, That would be awesome. If you guys haven't already, please do. 2, get involved. We've got so much work to do, you guys wouldn't believe it. If you guys have any passion to do anything like this, contact me or April or my wife, or heck, even Calvin. Give Calvin a call too. But yeah. But, you know, the CCOSD is going across the state here for the next 2 weeks, and we're trying to get as much signatures as we can and get people involved, but we're never going away. We're never going to stop. And the thing that I've noticed is a lot of these organizations, they get real pumped up and they get all worked up, and then something doesn't work right for them and they quit. That ain't going to work here. I'm not quitting ever. I've seen what this has done to my parents' home state of Colorado. It destroyed that state. It's done. The little town where my dad grew up, there's 2 pot shops and a grocery store left. It used to be a big booming ranching town. There's nothing left, just drug dealers and bums. And that ain't gonna happen here. So as long as I still have a breath in me, I'm gonna be fighting this, and along with a lot of other things. You know that 201, that bill, was it Senate Bill 201? We're gonna be doing that. We're gonna integrate that in with our tour, and we're gonna try and help them get signatures along with our signatures. And we need to start working together, you know. Everybody's got their own little thing, you know, like, well, I'm out on tour. Heck, we can get signatures for theirs too. There ain't no problem with that. You know, we're all working for the same cause to better the environment, to better our state. So anyway, can I'm not very good at that one, but it actually, what that did is it took all the jurisdiction away from the counties and the municipalities, as far as I understand, for regulating where these CO2 pipelines went through, and they gave it to the state and the federal government. So like if, say they wanted to run a CO2 pipeline through the middle of this church, they use eminent domain, and you don't have a choice. They just took your land, and it's done. And I'm going to read up on that on the trip. Thank you for the question, but I need to know more about that too. But another thing is, if you guys would like to donate, I absolutely despise asking people for money, but it does take money to, you know, and Ed, God bless Ed. He is so knowledgeable about all this stuff, and he is literally doing this for nothing. I mean, that's amazing. We gotta give Ed a big. And I'm a big guy and I don't cry very often, but I'll tell you one thing. He had me tearing up on the last trip because I worked this guy so hard. We were doing 2 shows a day most of the time, and we were gone for 12 days. I mean, I listened to Ed's presentation 18 times in a row. And it was a 2-hour presentation, and I learned something new every presentation. It was amazing. But, I mean, Ed is an amazing asset, and if you guys wouldn't mind donating a little bit, I would really appreciate it. I'm just like I'm saying, I don't like asking for money. If you can't afford it, don't. Please don't. But we're just needing gas money. There's no administrative fees. Everything that we get donated goes directly into buying paper and printer ink and gas in the car. And I don't know, I might buy a hotel room if Ed's a good boy and I don't have to park him in the back seat somewhere, you know. I got a story about Ed and a domestic dispute. Oh man, someday when we're not in church, I'm going to tell you guys about that one. But no. But anyway, I just thank you all for coming. God bless you all. I am so thankful for coming.